This is a special presentation of Rogers Community 10, Calgary.
Hi, and welcome to the 9th and final show in our Heritage 100 series. Exploring Calgary's history has been a lot of fun. It's taken us rafting down the Bow River and up in a hot air balloon. And today it's brought us in front of the Sacred Heart Convent in the middle of the Mission area. If you turn back the clock, about 100 years or so, you'd be standing in the middle of the village of Rouleauville, named after two brothers, Charles and Hector Rouleau. They were prominent members of the French-Canadian community that sprung up here. In today's show, another notable French-Canadian, Suzanne Sawyer, is going to be joined by some guests, and together they're going to chronicle some of the history of Rouleauville. So stay with us.
Bonjour. It's a great pleasure for me today to tell you about a part of Calgary's history that very few people really know about. As Calgary is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, the timing couldn't be better to honor some of Calgary's very first settlers and pioneers, our Francophone pioneers and trailblazers, les francophones de Calgary. Many of Calgary's founders and great leaders were originally from France and from Quebec. There was Le Père Léon Doucet, who, along with Sam Livingston, greeted F Troop in the summer of 1875 when the troop arrived at the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow Rivers, and Inspector Ephraim Brisebois, from whom Fort Calgary originally got its name, Father Albert Lacombe, who settled in Calgary in 1883, and Bishop Vital Grandin, who in 1882 sent for the Sisters of the Faithful Companions of Jesus. They settled in Calgary in 1885, thereupon opening the doors to St. Mary's School and Sacred Heart Convent and paving the way for the Roman Catholic separate school system as we know it today. Did you know that lumber king Peter Prince, known as the man who built Calgary and the father of hydroelectricity for all of Alberta, and after whom Princess Island Park is named, was Pierre-Antoine Prince, born near Trois-Rivières in Quebec? He settled in Calgary in 1885 and would become an outstanding member of Calgary's community. In 1891, on a cold and windy night, CP Rail brought 4 Grey Nuns to Calgary, of which at least 2 were francophones, Sister Beauchemin and Sister Horace Valiquette. These brave women of the cloth had been sent out here to look after health care for Calgary, and it was these women who helped to establish l'Hôpital Sainte-Croix, Holy Cross Hospital. And of course, the Rouleau brothers, who arrived in 1886 and 89, respectively. Judge Charles Borromée Rouleau was the first Supreme Court Justice for the Northwest Territories, and his brother, the Dr. Hector-Edouard Rouleau, was the first Chief Surgeon for the Northwest Mounted Police. Among their descendants was l'Abbé Albert-Edouard Rouleau, who was the first native-born Catholic priest to be ordained in Calgary. In 1980, historian Dr. Robert M. Stamp wrote an article entitled French and Catholic. As you're about to see, this article was to have a tremendous impact on Calgary and its people. Dr. Robert M. Stamp is presently residing in Toronto, but at the moment we're fortunate to have him in our studio as he is teaching the history of Canadian education at the University of Calgary, where he used to teach. Dr. Stamp, welcome.
Thank you. It's very nice to be back in Calgary.
Timing is everything. We seem to be doing quite well here. Dr. Stamp, the article that you wrote at the time, of course, has really done a lot for Calgary, or for the history of Francophones. Can you tell me a little about how you came about writing that article, why and what?
Well, Suzanne, I think there was both a personal and a professional reason. Mm-hmm. In 1969, my wife and I moved to Calgary. I began teaching at the university, and we bought a house in the Elbow Park area, quite close to the Mission District. Mm-hmm. So we ended up doing a lot of our shopping along 4th Street, walking and bicycle riding through the Mission District, old Rouleauville. I remember Despin's Hardware on 4th Street, and I thought that must be a remnant of an older Calgary that I was at that time totally unfamiliar with. But the Holy Cross Hospital was our nearby hospital. I remember we used it a couple of times for emergency services. I would pass old St. Mary's High School, the red brick building on 2nd Street, and we would walk around the convent area. But I think what really spurred this article came out of my professional life. In 1975, I had done a history of the public school system for the 100th anniversary of the founding of Fort Calgary. And it was pointed out to me shortly after the book was published that I had got something terribly wrong, that the first high school in Calgary was not in the public system, but it was in what later became the separate school system. So I thought, I've got to broaden my research, so I began researching the origins of the separate school system, St. Mary's, and the convent and the Sisters of the Faithful Companions of Jesus, and it sort of all came together, and I thought, this needs to be written about. There's an article here, and it gradually took shape, and it turned out to be quite a bit longer than I thought. It was far too long for a Calgary Herald article, but it turned out that the editor of Calgary Magazine at that time, Penny Williams, was also very interested in the French Catholic roots of Calgary. She herself, as a book editor, had done a lot of translating of books from French to English. So we worked together, and this article was the result. And I'm just amazed at the impact it seems to have had.
It must have been quite interesting for you as you discovered all these things with respect to the history.
Yes, and how interconnected they were.
Yeah. Of course, we have, from the very beginning, there was Father Doucette, who was the first white man here.
Yes.
Who was originally from France. And then, of course, Father Lacombe, who was very...
Oh, well, his story is just so intriguing, and how he seemed to play a hand in everything. Yeah.
And
so it's pleasing to me to come back and find that now there's a high school named Father Lacombe High School, an elementary school named after Mother Mary Green. It's just marvelous.
I particularly liked reading that Father Lacombe had traveled in 1883 to Ottawa to secure the land that became Rouleauville.
Yes.
He must have been quite a trailblazer. They're saying in the archives that he was telling the Minister of the Interior, well, if you don't mind, sir, I'll sit here and wait until you give me the land.
Could you imagine someone doing that today?
He was quite the character.
Yes.
He also appointed himself, I think, president of the CP Rail for one day and gave himself a lifetime pass while he was at it.
Yes. I think it's very important that Calgary acknowledge its Francophone roots.
There's even a park now, Rouleauville Square.
Oh, that was so exciting to read that. Almost as soon as I arrived back in Calgary this fall, there it was, the announcement that a park would be created.
And you know the story behind that?
No, tell me.
Well, what happened was that it's Terry Hoyt and Norm Harburn with Calgary Parks Foundation, who originally set the machine in motion to build this wonderful park in front of the cathedral. But it was Terry Hoyt's mother-in-law who showed him that article. And when he read it, he started doing more research, just as the same thing as you did, and thought, my word, there's a lot more to it in here, and found Delores, Woolrich, Rouleau, and the family history, and now the park will be named Rouleauville Square.
Oh, I'm so pleased. I think it's very important that Calgary acknowledge its Francophone roots.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Rouleau was originally from Île-Verte in Quebec and was one of two particularly prominent community leaders in Calgary, where he settled in 1886. He was the first appointed Supreme Court judge for the Northwest Territories. His brother was the first chief surgeon with the Northwest Mounted Police and settled in Calgary soon thereafter. With us now is Delores Rouleau Woolrich, Judge Rouleau's great-granddaughter. Welcome, Delores.
Thank you, Suzanne.
You've brought some beautiful things to show us here today. Your great-grandfather was a very famous man and left quite a legacy, as did his brother. Can you tell us a little about your family's history?
Well, I didn't really realize it was a famous family until I was in about grade 7, I guess, taking social studies at St. Mary's Girls' School. And they had a slide show and showed Rouleauville. And of course, Rouleauville was all the area from 17th Avenue down to the river, and from 4th Street West to 1st Street West. And it was named Rouleauville because of the doctor and the judge living right in that area. And right up to the present time, there has always been a Rouleau that lived in Rouleauville. My aunt lives just 1 block off now, and so we've been in that area a long time, now called Mission, of course.
Yeah.
And most of us all went to St. Mary's Church, to St. Mary's Cathedral, and to St. Mary's School, be it the boys' school or the girls' school.
Oh, yeah. You have quite a number of things here. That we have the christening gowns.
These are the christening gowns, yes, those are the christening gowns, and these were worn by the all of the judge's family, and also by my grandfather's family, and also by my family.
So the judge was born in
He was born in 1840.
1840, and directly in Île-Verte, that was his birthplace.
Yes.
And so he, when he came out here, of course, he didn't first come out in Calgary precisely.
No, he came out and he had settled in North Battleford. And while there, of course, the Riel Rebellion was brewing. And he was very concerned. He wrote to the lieutenant governor at the time and said that something was really going to have to be done about settling the claims with both the Indian people and the Métis people. And so then he more or less was chased out of North Battleford, and we have in one of the writings on him, my grandfather tells the tale of being put into the wagon in the night and being made to leave the place of North Battleford and heading further west. And they were leaving one side while the Indians were coming in the other side. And my great grandfather, after he got to where he was going, he writes in this little article, which I thought was really very rather strange. He wired back to the Secretary of State, and he said, "Got here safe with family. Indians ransacked and plundered my house. Am poor as a church mouse. God save the Queen."
The importance was God save the Queen.
That was the important part. Not to leave that's true.
And of course, once out here, he established himself in Rouleauville, or what became Rouleauville.
Yes.
I believe this is the house.
This is the house. This was the house on 19th Avenue. It's where the Athlone Apartments is at this time, and it was just off 4th Street West and 19th Avenue, and it was a mansion. I mean, he built it for his wife, who he worshipped. He absolutely worshipped Madame Rouleau. And she was a very elegant lady, and in the album that I have assembled over the past few years, I have an invitation. You only went to see her by invitation, and I have a copy of one of her invitations, and the man coming to see her was Mr. Hull.
Oh my, could it be very far in here to have a look, or?
Well,
what do you think?
Not.
Or there's some things in there in particular right here.
There it is, right there.
If our cameras can see that.
At home, I'd say there.
And behind you on the wall, we have some
of the pictures. Yes, the judge is behind me here, and the doctor is on this side.
Dr. Rouleau's there, yes. And of course, you have the family Bible here as well.
Yes,
that's quite a beautiful, beautiful book.
That was given to the judge by the doctor on his 50th birthday. So it's written 1890, and they're given by Edward to Charles.
I don't dare open it. It's a very precious treasure for your family to have, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And we had a flood in our house 3 years ago, and I was very fortunate that this was upstairs and not in the basement, yes. Yes.
Oh, God looks after it.
He does.
And of course, you're a member of the Pioneers Club, I believe.
Yes, I'm a member of the Southern Alberta Pioneer and Descendants Organization, and a past president. Yes, I'm a past president. And that organization was set up to gather the information and the history of the pioneers in Calgary, because so much of it just gets lost as you're going along. And they meet every week to do that. In order to belong to the Pioneer Association, your pioneer had to be here prior to 1890. So we're always looking for new people, or people that would, you know, discover that they were here prior to that time and would like to join the organization.
That's wonderful. There's also the courthouse, I believe, that has a special room.
Yes, yes. When they refurbished all the courthouse, they dedicated a room to Judge Rouleau, and it was very nice to be invited. It's been wonderful. The last couple of years have just been wonderful. The Rouleau family sort of were always low profile, I guess you might say. And this year and the last year has just brought out a lot of the family history. And I really almost feel like I know these people a little more personally now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I have to say, with all the research I've done, I feel that way too. It's really a privilege that you were here with us today. You were also in the Stampede Parade, were you not, with your granddaughter?
Yes,
so
I was
quite
there.
A few generations.
We celebrated the 100th anniversary this year, and Shauna and I rode in the Stampede Parade under the banner of the Pioneers and Descendants Organization.
She would have been quite proud to have been there with her grandmother.
Oh yeah, she thought that was great fun.
And there was also a float, a Francophone float, I think,
yes,
with
that was
depicting
wonderful.
all the
yes, that was wonderful this year.
Pioneers.
That was wonderful to get that float into the parade this year.
Well, I'm really pleased that you were here. Thank you so much for having joined us, and we'll be looking more for some stories on Rouleauville and the Rouleau family.
Thank you very much,
Delores.
Suzanne.
Sister Alice Daly is a sister with the Faithful Companions of Jesus and has been here in Calgary for a number of years now. Sister is originally from Ireland, but is quite well versed on the history, of course, of the Faithful Companions of Jesus, including the opening of the convent, Sacred Heart Convent, here in 1885. Sister Alice, can you tell us a little bit of the history and background of the Faithful Companions of Jesus and the convent?
Yes, Suzanne. Our order was founded in France in 1820 by a widow, Marie-Madeleine de Bonneau-Douay. She had been married for 1 year when her husband died, and she was left with a son to bring up. And after the death of her husband, she felt drawn to religious life, but she didn't seem to belong with any of the orders that existed at the time. She was very friendly with the Jesuits, to whom she sent her son to school, and she wanted to found an order that would resemble the Jesuits. And so in 1820, she started a small group of women whom she called the Faithful Companions of Jesus. And the aim was education, to teach the poor in particular. Now, she died in 1858, and her successor was Mother Josephine Petit, and she was living in Saint-Andoré in Brittany, in France, when she received a letter from Bishop Grandin from St. Albert in the Northwest Territories, Dominion of Canada. It was dated 1882, March 1882, and the bishop said he had received a letter from one of the novices, one of the young sisters, saying that she had heard of his mission and would love to go and help him. And so he said, Reverend Mother, could you send me some sisters? We're poor, we live in log cabins, there are no towns, I have very little to offer you, but we need sisters to teach the girls. And so she responded, she said, you tell me that the journey will be long and difficult. You can't even pay our way to bring us here. And when we arrive, there'll be dangers and difficulties. But she said, you're asked for sacrifice, and so I will send sisters. And she sent 4 sisters in 1883. They arrived in, eventually in Prince Albert, and they founded convents in Duck Lake and Prince Albert, and opened schools for girls, boarding schools, day schools. Very shortly afterwards, in 1885, the Riel Rebellion broke out, and the sisters were in Duck Lake, in Batoche. They were right in the middle of the violence. They were very well treated by both sides. The Riel's people were very good to them and wanted to protect them, but it was eventually under the care of the British Army that they managed to come to Calgary. So really they were escaping from the Riel Rebellion. They couldn't stay in Batoche or Duck Lake or any of those places anymore. It wasn't safe. So they came to Calgary at the invitation of the bishop, arrived in 1885, and immediately opened a school. When they arrived, the bishop, of course, was an oblate father, an oblate priest, and the oblates had a little log cabin on the banks of the Elbow River, and they vacated that little log cabin and gave it to the sisters and built themselves another little house. And right there, they started the first school. And after a few months, they had about 30 students, white and Métis students, and the school continued to grow. In 1885, Mother Mary Green, one of the sisters who was teaching at Sacred Heart Convent, was instrumental in founding the Lacombe Separate School District, Roman Catholic Separate School District number 1, which was later in 1911 changed to Calgary Separate number 1. But in the meantime, the school continued to grow. The Separate School District built St. Mary's High School adjacent to the convent in 1909, and by the time Alberta became a province in 1905, we already had grades 1 to 12, so that when Alberta became a province, the separate schools in Alberta received the same grants as the public schools, because the schools were already schools were already founded right up to high school.
So if Sister Mary Green is looking on us now, she must be quite proud to see all those children enrolled in the Catholic school system.
Indeed, and in fact, just last year, the Catholic system opened a school and named it Mother Mary Green School. It's in Edgemont, and it's a very fine school, a beautiful school.
Sister Alice, I thank you for having been with us.
You're very welcome.
In 1885, Calgary's first school board, the Lacombe District No. 1 Roman Catholic Separate School Board, was established for the Sacred Heart Convent and School in Rouleauville. We know it today as the Roman Catholic Separate School Board District No. 1. Zoel Cyr-Miquelon was a trustee with the school board at that time, and we welcome his granddaughter, Berthe Miquelon. Bonjour, Berthe.
Bonjour.
You have quite a family history. You come from ancestors who are not only famous here in Calgary, but Alberta-wide. You tell us a little about Zoel Cyr-Miquelon, your grandfather.
Grandfather came out here in 1885 rather, and to establish the West. And he had to build immigration huts, they called them, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. He brought out 3 sons with him and left 1 son in each one. He stayed with them for a while to get them started and so on. And then came to Alberta with my father And then they got settled here, and my father started and everything. And grandfather then had to go surveying, and he founded the city of Wetaskiwin and built the first house, the first store, and the first post office in Wetaskiwin.
Oh, my.
And then he was the first postmaster as well, and then his son replaced him. And he discovered 3 lakes there. 2 have since dried up, and the Lake Miquelon is still there, the name of it, and very favorite spot.
And he was the first Justice of the Peace, I think?
The first Justice of the Peace for the Northwest Territories, that was in 1892.
And now he was originally from Saint-Camille, was it, in Quebec?
Yes.
And I believe you were telling me he established that city as well.
Well, yes, along with several others, you know.
He was a busy man.
Yes.
And of course, he would have been one of the founding fathers of the education system here for Calgary.
Yes, one of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Following that, your father now was an alderman with the city of Calgary.
Yes.
That was Romeo Cyr-Miquelon.
Yes, he was and he was an alderman, and he sang in the church choir, and very active, and he was very active in starting curling here.
With all his activities, he was also, I believe, president of the Conservative Party in the days of Mr. Bennett, who was premier at the time.
Yes, he and Mr. Bennett were very good friends.
Berthe, you yourself, of course, are a member of the Pioneer Club Association here in town.
Yes.
And I believe you were honorary lady 2 years ago. Is that correct?
I was Pioneer Lady of the Year.
Oh.
Because I was so active in writing up the family history.
You were even active in the Stampede. You were in 1929. You were in the parade on horseback. Yes, I used to ride the horseback in the Stampede parade. I thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
And there you have it, Rouleauville then and now. A look at the Rouleau family and some of the actors who helped shape Calgary as we know it today. So long for now. Au revoir, les amis.
Of our city's centennial celebrations, the parking lots in front of St. Mary's Cathedral are going to become Rouleau Park. It's a great way to mark an important part of Calgary's history, and it'll be a great place for future generations to come and stroll and commune with history.